Hi, I'm Carole Owens, and this is Stockbridge Updates. You know, I had pneumonia. Who gets pneumonia in July? I had pneumonia, and you miss a lot. As it turns out, when you can't breathe, you can't do anything else. But while I was sick, a lot was going on with our beloved BSO. And I am so thrilled because I have two people heartily involved in this who's going to explain it all to us. And that would be George Whiting and Quinn MacKenzie of the Red Rose Campaign. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for
And
having us.
you are coming to us remotely.
Yes.
Stockbridge Updates on air has now entered the 21st century. You two guys are in Boston?
We are.
Okay,
We
and
are.
I'm right here in the Berkshires. So please begin at the beginning and tell me how you first got organized. And I think I know, but be sure you tell the audience what the red rose symbolizes and where that symbol came from.
Sure. Happy to start. So on March 6th of this year, there was an announcement made to the general public, to the musicians of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, and to the Maestro's management team saying, we are terminating Andres Nelson's contract. And that came as a shock to not only people that are involved in the classical community, music community, but I think to all parties involved, people were very surprised and blindsided. And one of the things we saw very early on after the announcement was the musicians wearing a red flower on stage, which we later found out was a symbol of an homage to the Latvian flag, which has red in it. And so we saw the flowers, and I said to Quinn, I think after one or two concerts, I said, we should do something. Maybe stand in front of Symphony Hall, and we'll just order some roses and hand them out. And that was the genesis of what we've now called the BSO Patron Action Network and the Red Flower Campaign. And I'll throw it over to Quinn because he's been highly involved in this, in the planning as well and execution of this.
First,
Yeah,
tell us, George mentioned Latvia. Is Andris Nelson's Latvian?
He is, yes.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
You're
The
welcome.
audience thanks you. Go right ahead, Quinn.
yeah, definitely. Yes, the Latvian flag has the red. There's actually someone who lives on West Street, right across from Tanglewood, that's flying a Latvian flag on their house. So that's really cool to see as well. But yeah, we really were just kind of so upset by this whole thing that we felt like we needed to do something. And seeing the musicians on stage with the roses really gave us the idea of what we could do. We weren't sure what was going to happen, but it's really taken off from that first time we stood out there. You got a lot of curious people, but really a lot of people saying thank you so much for what you're doing. And it really is just taken off from there. And so we ended up standing outside Symphony Hall for all the concerts for the rest of the season, the BSO season. And then we even drove down to Carnegie Hall, kind of on short notice, last minute. Went down there and stood in front of Carnegie Hall as well. And we're joined at that point actually by some members of the local musicians union down there who also helped us hand out roses and some statements of support from their organization as well. And so it's really kind of continued to expand. We've been out in the Berkshires more than we were planning this summer. We weren't really sure what was going to happen. People had kind of already heard about it in Boston and in New York as well, because there was a pretty warm response at Carnegie Hall. And in fact, the general manager there was saying that this is the he hasn't seen anything like this in 20 years, the amount of applause and ovations that they got at the end there. And so we were out in the Berkshires this summer, and I bought another 3,000 roses, and I was like, well, maybe this is too much. We'll see. But we'll have some leftovers for the fall if we don't hand these all out. And half of those are gone on the first weekend.
Oh
And
my
I've
gosh.
now, oh yeah. And so now I've ordered another two or three batches of 3,000 roses. So we're up to over 12,000 roses. We
Wow.
bought. Haven't completely distributed all those yet, but safely over 10,000 handed out to different patrons. And then we also had the opportunity to have a storefront that we actually opened in Stockbridge on Elm Street, which worked out really well for visibility. And also we had an open house where people could come by and kind of chat with us about the campaign. get roses, all sorts of different swag. We even have picnic blankets that have Andres Nelson's on them. So we've seen actually a number of those out on the lawn at Tanglewood. So it's really taken off in the Berkshires in a way that we weren't even sure would happen. So it's been great to see.
George, um, I mean, one of the things obviously Quinn makes clear to us is visibility for the campaign and making sure that lots and lots of people know about what's going on. But George, can you tell me kind of what the goals of the
Sure.
Red Rose campaign is? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there are several facets to our campaign, and I think front and center initially was how do we get Andres Nelson's to stay? How do we convince the board that maybe there's a decision that we should re-examine, right? So reinstatement was the impetus for using Andres's face, as you see on all of our campaign materials, because he's a notable figure, and part of that quickly translated into, wait a second, the musicians are going into a union negotiation, which we're not privy to. And to be clear, we probably should have said this from the beginning, we're just two fans, right? We're two patrons that decided to stand up to see if we could make a difference, if we could help the musicians and help Andres and help the thousands of voices that have been speaking up from, you have people 89, 90 years old handing out roses on Mass Ave in Boston to high school students at BU Tanglewood Institute coming up to us on the streets in Lenox and Stockbridge saying, "Can I wear a rose? Can I have a shirt?" So anyways, to answer your question, we firmly believe that Andres Nelson's is a dovetail fit for what the orchestra does. From classical music repertoire to the cohesion he has with the players. The players are almost unanimously behind him. And then second to that is ensuring that musicians, not just the BSO, but musicians across the world, really, because this is global now, can retain artistic say and voice in what they do and how things are planned. One of the reasons that this has come about and how the discourse in the media has been portraying this institution is that management from the BSO has said that there was a misalignment in future vision.
Right.
We don't know what that future vision is yet. We've been waiting. We're going into almost 6 months since the announcement. There have been allusions to what that vision would be based on Tanglewood programming for popular artist series and things like that. So essentially, we're here to support the musicians 100%. And for us, it's a no-brainer to wear the rose. And when you go to Tanglewood and you go to the shed and you go to the lawn, you are in a sea of hundreds, if not thousands of people wearing the rose. It's very surreal. And little did we know that it would be such a polarizing symbol for management to look at us as a threat, when in all actuality, the principles of what the BSO has always promulgated around partnership, place, and community is exactly what we're doing. We've enabled so many folks that have never even wanted to speak up on an issue to say, wait a second, we believe in the BSO and we believe the musicians are the BSO. How do we support them? And I had the honor, honestly, to meet the chair of the board a couple weeks ago at the shed, very unexpectedly, and had an interaction that was cordial and professional. But the first thing that Barbara Hossetter said to me was, "Why are you wearing the shirt? There's no chance that Andres Nelson's will be reinstated." And the second question was, "Why are you wearing this?" I said, "It's in support of the musicians." And that has been clear from day one. And as you see this campaign evolve, we didn't know, like Quinn said, what this was going to be. We thought this was going to be maybe a couple of weeks. Well, now we're going to month 6. By the time September rolls around, we'll be
one of the things that I think gets repeated from the administrative side, from the board and from Chad Smith's office, is that somehow this is being driven by their need for money. Now, there have been many, many, many articles by Lee Eisman and by,
Thomas Dinsmore.
Thomas Dinsmore. I love the name Dinsmore.
Yeah.
And especially Thomas Dinsmore, who is a CPA, I think, delving into the figures. From your position or from your connections with the orchestra, is there a money problem?
Well, yeah, that's a really interesting question because at least from what they've been saying, the narrative that they've kind of been saying, okay, we're persistent deficits. We really need to change. The orchestra is kind of failing, it's doomed, that sort of thing. Really isn't backed up by the numbers. So what Thomas Dinsmore has done is actually taken publicly available data, so their tax filings, as well as audited financial statements that they have to submit as
The
well, taken
990s. Yeah,
the 90s
990.
tax forms. Yeah, and taking a look through, done analysis that was he's retired now, but that was his whole career doing this type of financial analysis. And really their claims don't seem to hold up. So that's sort of the persistent deficits narrative. Well, in 13 out of the last 20 years, they had a surplus. So that's really doesn't work there. The
Yeah, let me
decapitalizing the
let me
endowment,
repeat
yeah.
let me repeat that. For the majority of the last decade and a half, they've had a surplus. And
Mhm.
their endowment, as I understand it, is in the billions. That
It
that would
is.
that would
Uh,
be with a B.
not quite billions, but they do have the largest endowment of any orchestra in the U.S. It might be up there in the world ranking. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but yeah, it's 600 million now. It's kind of up to 700 million on the latest filing. So and that's about double any other
And there's
orchestras in the
only one
U.S.
endowment, there aren't two.
That's correct. So the endowment is kind of split into some pieces where they talk about some of the funds are restricted. So those are things like people. A lot of times you'll see when the on the personnel, it's like, oh, this the so and so chair for this instrument, and so a lot of people will sponsor specific chairs, and the money that they give is directed towards something specific like that, like playing that player's salary, or certain building construction, that sort of thing. But there's also a portion of the funds that are kind of at the board's discretion on how they're used. So yeah, they've been kind of claiming it's like, well, we can't really do what we want with the money. There's only really this much we can use. But when you run the numbers, as Thomas Dinsmore has, those claims don't quite add up.
Yeah, George, um, Chad Smith came to us from California,
Mhm.
and maybe he's got sort of a showman perspective. I don't know. But it seems to me during this summer, what he's been doing is rather than speaking with or negotiating with the orchestra or with the opposing sides, what he's really concentrating on is putting on a very good show. And so he had Yo-Yo Ma for I think a week,
9 days.
9 day.
Yeah,
Wow, nine
yeah.
days. And I have to say, if Yo-Yo Ma is not the best and best known and best loved musician in the world, I don't know who is. So that was a good start. And
Hmm.
then there was a marvelous concert that had James Taylor and John Baptiste and Yo-Yo Ma, and I forgot who else, you'll remind me, on the stage at one time, which was pretty impressive.
Hmm.
So, I mean, how's that going? Is he selling his message through the entertainment? I mean, it is a variable.
Yeah, I think, I do want to just position one thing, this term of opposing sides. I think just to address that a little bit, yes, we have an agenda to support the musicians, and I don't doubt that. In all honesty, I think that Chad and Barbara and the board also want to support the musicians and also want to be stewards of the institution. What we're seeing is a failure in communication
Right.
around what's actually happening, right? And so, to answer your question around Chad's roots in California, you know, um, California, as we all know, is an epicenter of music, entertainment, money, large populations, right? And when you compare areas of the country like Los Angeles to, say, Greater Boston or even the Berkshires, right? It's a different realm and sort of magnitude of reach, right? That doesn't discount the BSO or the Boston Pop's ability to put on really, really wonderful programming. And
Absolutely.
and to your point of bringing up John Batiste and James Taylor and Yo-Yo,
All
um,
at once.
all at once, those are three musicians who are highly regarded, highly respected, and unfortunately have not spoken up at all during this crisis. And to share the stage with an orchestra who has undergone really has no other orchestra has undergone such turmoil like this in the last 5 months. And to see musicians that are respected, especially Yo-Yo, who lives in Cambridge and is has been associated with the BSO for decades, and in fact won a Grammy this year with the BSO, to not have him wear a rose or even speak up and say, "Hey, I stand with the musicians," it's pretty disappointing. And that doesn't take away from his artistry or his ability to be, like you said, probably one of the most famous classical musicians, if not musicians in the world. And I've always been a huge fan of him. I've admired his artistry and musicality. But what I have experienced in the last 5 months is, hey, you're a Boston guy and you haven't said anything about supporting the musicians. And that to me uh, speaks to a larger issue around what is actually happening behind the scenes. Yeah, when I see this concert, sorry about James and John and Yo-Yo, yeah, I'm sure that was sold well. I wasn't, unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there at the concert last week, and I was too busy moving our headquarters in Stockbridge around the corner at that time. And I think if you read the most recent critique from the Boston Globe, AZ Madonna, the music critic there, she does talk about how that concert was sold, and if and then at the end of that article she talks about, if this is the vision for Boston Symphony Orchestra going forward, we need to examine what that means for classical music,
Right.
essentially. And so, I think at the end of the day, there's no doubt that we want the orchestra to be successful. That includes the BSO and the pops. I think often the public doesn't realize that almost all of the pops is the BSO, less the principal musicians. It's the same musicians,
Yeah,
among others.
let
Yeah.
me
Sorry.
go, let
Yeah.
me go back, let me go back a minute,
Sure.
about the place of classical music.
Yeah.
Um, Brian Bell in his Tanglewood on Parade, he had a segment on Koussevitzky, which was very, very interesting. And if it's on YouTube or something, everybody get hold of it. Brian is a great classical music historian.
Awesome.
Awesome, yes, he is. And but one of the sentences in that was when Koussevitzky said, and this was as early as the 40s, 1940s, guys.
Yeah.
He said that the BSO has ascended now and is certainly, if not the best classical music orchestra, then one of three. And we all know Philadelphia, Cleveland, and Boston. And that's marvelous. And it's like all gifts, it also comes with a responsibility. And I'm wondering, I think Mr. Dinsmore makes a pretty strong case that they're not in such dire financial circumstance, if they're in any bad financial circumstance at all. But even if there were, isn't there a place in the broader cultural community for supporting an art form, even if it didn't make the most money? I mean, it seems to me that they have sort of an obligation to the larger idea of classical music in America. And let me just
Absolutely.
say this, and to get your response. The way I met you two gentlemen is I stopped in the Elm Street office. I was very glad that I did. I'm very glad that you're with us today. And one of the things we talked about, because I told you I was a doctor, a therapist for 31 years, I'm now retired. And one of the things that we do among individuals or even among businesses or corporations or opposing interests is we know how to negotiate. And it seemed to me that this was just prime for a conversation. I mean, George makes the point that maybe everybody is a protector and a defender of the orchestra and classical music and the history of the BSO and the history of the BSO at Tanglewood. One quick plug, I just finished a book on the history of Tanglewood. So, you know, maybe this is prime for negotiation. And I want to say two things about that, and then I'm going to turn it over to you gentlemen to wrap us up. And that is, I contacted Chad Smith, and I was with that idea. And I said, that's something that I would do quietly. I don't have to be paid. It's a skill I have in the old kit bag. And I'd be happy to do that. What surprised me is that I've been communicating with Chad back and forth on the book or on different subjects, maybe over the last 2 years. He always answers me. He always answers within really a very quick stretch of time because he's a busy man. He didn't even answer me. He turned down the idea and the offer, because it doesn't matter if I do it, any number of people could do negotiation. But he turned down me and the idea by sending an intermediary. I don't even know who she was, an assistant of his or whatever, to say, Chad said to tell you. And that really, so from my experience on the outside, there's a real communication breakdown. So all I have to say about the whole circumstance is, gee whiz, lots more people should be talking to each other and talking to the, there should be lots of talking going on. George, Quinn, take us home. We only have a couple minutes, about 5 minutes left. So what is it that the public needs to know?
Absolutely, yeah, and we'll say we've had a similar experience. I mean, the petition that we've launched that has over 4,000 signatures at this point was originally to call for just such a discussion, a town hall between management and kind of concerned members of the public. And yeah, same thing. We've either gotten no response or kind of a brush off, non-answer. And yeah, it's disappointing that. Because really a lot of this, it's like we still don't have, if they do have a plan for the BSO going forwards, they really haven't let anybody in the public know what this future vision is or where that could take us. And to your point earlier about, that isn't it important to kind of preserve this classical tradition? I think absolutely 100% agree with that. Because there's all sorts of organizations, in Boston that are presenting concerts. There's so much music going on. I mean, I go to over 90 concerts a year sometimes with all the things we have going on in Boston. But there's nothing else that does the orchestral tradition like the BSO, and that's really a model for the rest of the U.S., the rest of North America, and really a model for the world as well. So, if we're suddenly kind of abandoning that tradition in search of something that perhaps is more popular, has some more ticket sales, I think we have a problem there, really straying away from the BSO's mission. And I think there are ways that even if there was a financial kind of crisis, which from the numbers, it looks like that may be not the case or exaggerated. I think there's different ways to address that still preserve the classical tradition. So actually, even earlier today, Mayor Wu called into Boston Public Radio and was asked a question about the BSO. And she mentioned getting into the BSO, that she was part of the Young Professionals Organization. She was excited to go part of that. George was very involved with that as well. And that's a program that they have since gotten rid of. And I think that was something that brought in a lot of younger generation and got them interested in music. So I think focusing on efforts like that is really better and in more in alignment with their mission.
George, I'm going to let you have the last word, but I want to say the following to the audience. Chad Smith was immediately invited the minute that George and Quinn accepted, standing on Elm Street. I emailed Chad and invited him. Chad, you are still invited anytime, remotely or in person, to let us know your side. And to all of you, as an outsider listening, boy, do people need more information? What strategic plan?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, thanks for giving me the last word. Yeah, I will close with the communication piece. I think that's the piece that we have been most focused on is the communication. And you're not the only person that Chad has declined to go on the air with. I think that is something we've seen with other appearances on media here in the greater Boston area. But talking to the communication piece, I think it's the board's responsibility. So there's two boards, the board of trustees, chaired by Barbara Hostetter, and the board of advisors. They're both boards that help shape the direction of the orchestra. I think there is a huge disparity in the information they're receiving. And in an effort to be the stewards that they are charged to be with, I would implore them to have conversations with us, to have conversations with each other, and have conversations with the musicians who are the most impacted. And with that being
Yeah.
said, please go to Thomas Dinsmore's Substack. It has a lot of information. There's no spin. He's direct. He is
Good.
open to being corrected. And you can follow the Red Flower Campaign on Instagram at Red Flower Campaign, or check out standwithandres.org. And Carole, thank you so much for the time today. We deeply appreciate
Thank you so much for coming. I love your enthusiasm and I love your values with respect to this. And a final word, I'll take the prerogative. And that is that they are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. They have the benefits, BSO has the benefits of that. And the obligation that goes with that benefit, you guys have repeated more than once, and that is to protect the mission. And the mission is not to make as much money in the fiscal year as possible. The
Preach.
mission, huh?
Preach. You're right. You're 100% right.
And the mission in part is to protect classical music for our country. And then that can be broken down into specific tasks. So may they please do their mission, earn their standing as a nonprofit, and start talking to people.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much.
Thank
Bye,
you.
all.
Thanks so much for having us.